Hey you guys, so today I'm going to teach you two rules in division. So let's look at our objective. I will divide using the rules for 1 and 0, okay? What do we do when we divide numbers by 1 or 0, okay? So let's look at rule number 1. It says, when you divide any number by 1, when you guys divide any number by 1, the quotient, now remember the quotient is the answer to a division problem. When you divide any number by 1, the quotient is that number. So what does that look like? Here, let's see. All right, so look at number 1. As you can see right here with my hearts, there is one group of hearts, okay? Well, in division, we know that we start with our total number. How many total hearts do you see? Well, there are 4 hearts. Again, we're looking at problem number 1. There are 4 hearts divided by the number of groups. Well, there's 1 square. That represents one group. Equals, well, we know in division, this number, the divisor, can represent the number of groups. It can also represent the number in each group. But for this case, this 1 right here represents the number of groups. The answer, the quotient, represents the number of hearts in this one group. Well, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 hearts in that group. So 4 hearts divided by one group. How many hearts are in that group? 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, you have 4 divided by 1 equals 4. And that's exactly what rule number 1 says. So let me reread that. When you divide any number by 1, okay, here's that number, 4 divided by 1, the quotient is that number. So as you can see, the answer is 4. The dividend. So when you divide any number, in this case is 4, divided by 1, your answer will be that number. So what about, let's look at number 2. Here you have another group. This time you have some stars. So let's write a division sentence that represents this picture. There are a total of 3 stars divided by how many groups? One group. The square represents one group. And notice that we are dividing by 1, so our answer should be this number. How many hearts are in that group? 3. Okay? So any number divided by 1 will always be that number. So 3 divided by 1 equals 3. What about 18? My favorite number. 18 divided by 1. Will be this number, the dividend, 18. Let's see. 5. 5 divided by 1 will equal 5. And we know in division we can check our work using multiplication. You multiply the divisor and the quotient, and if you multiply 1 times 5, you should get 5, which is the dividend, okay? Again, when you divide any number by 1, the quotient is that number. So 10 divided by 1 will equal 10. And you can obviously draw a picture to help you with that as well. And to check our work, we know that 1 times 10 equals 10. So you know that is right. Okay. So that was rule number 1. Rule number 2, when you divide any number by itself except 0, the quotient will be 1. All right? For example, let's look at this one. Let's look at picture number 3. All right, so in division, how many squares do we have in all? 1, 2, 3, 4 squares. These 4 squares were divided by how many groups? 1, 2, 3, 4. And how many squares are in each group? Well, there are one square in each group. So that is our answer. So when you divide any number by itself, look how these two numbers, the dividend and the divisor, when those two numbers are the same number, your quotient will be 1. Okay? 7 divided by 7 equals 1. 3 divided by 3 equals 1. And if you want to draw a picture to help you understand that, we can. We can draw a picture for 3 divided by 3. There are a total of 3 objects. We'll do circles divided by 3 groups. Let me draw my 3 groups. 1, 2, 3. How many objects do I have in all? 3. So I have to put 1 in each group, right? 3. Total of 3. We're divided into 1, 2, 3 groups. How many circles are in each group? 1. And we can check our work. We know 3 times 1 equals 3. All right, so that was rule number 2. When you are dividing any number by itself, they are the same numbers, 4 divided by 4. When you divide any number by itself, the quotient will be 1. All right, let's look at rule number 3. Rule number 3 says, all right, so for rule number 1 and 2, that's when we divide by 1. Rule number 3 says when you divide by 0, by any number, the quotient will be 0. For example, look at this problem right here, the purple squares. As you can see, these squares represent equal groups. All right, there is nothing. There's no objects in the equal groups, so that would be 0. There's no objects in the equal groups, but so it's 0 divided by how many groups? 1, 2, 3, 4 groups. Well, the answer tells us how many are in each group, but there's nothing in each group, so the answer is 0. And we can check our work by multiplying the divisor times the quotient. 4 times 0 is 0. Okay? So when you're multiplying by dividing by 0, 0 divided by 2 will equal 0, you guys. 2 times 0 is 0. 0 divided by 9. Any number that's divided by 0 is 0. 0 divided by 1 is 0. Okay? So when you divide by 0, by any number, the quotient is 0. And I do want to point out, boys and girls, this will never work. So look here. 9 divided by 0 equals blank. You cannot divide any number by 0. This will never work, okay? Dividing by 0, right here, dividing by 0 is not possible, okay? Because this is like saying, well, there's 9 objects. 9, this represents our total number. There are 9 objects divided by no groups. If there are no groups at all, how can you separate, how can you partition, how can you divide the total amount into groups when there's no groups? Does that make sense? So you have to have equal groups in order to separate your total. Like if you had 9 cupcakes, how can you arrange or divide cupcakes when there are no groups? You can't do that. So this is not impossible. If you ever see a problem like this, you can't. It doesn't work out. There's not an answer. Birds and 4 birds.